Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell has disappeared. But we are, I think, reaching a point where some big names will be thrown out. There have been hints of that already, with congressmen raiding out, hinting at certain people. So I think the dam is beginning to burst, and Andrew is just the first of many high-profile people who will now suddenly be in the news.
Do you think so? From that Epstein list, I mean, Trump, of course, is one of them.
Yes, Trump, Clinton. Mandelson clearly has come out recently.
Yeah, tell me a bit about Mandelson. So just for those who are maybe of a younger generation, who is Peter Mandelson?
Well, Peter Mandelson was Deputy Prime Minister at one point. I mean, he's a great fixer. He's been in British politics a long time. He was European Commissioner at one point. He was, I think, head of the Department of Trade. Very close ally to Blair. He helped with the whole Blair project, the new Labour. And he's kind of continued to be at the top of British politics for a long time. He was appointed last year as the British ambassador in Washington. And that's where, because of his close connections with a lot of the Americans, and that's where he had to resign, because clearly, there was this embarrassing link with Epstein. There are pictures of him choosing clothes with Epstein on the Caribbean. There's now correspondence showing they were very close. They were involved in money-making operations. I mean, Blair was also involved. So was Clinton. There's a whole network of businessmen who, were using Epstein, and Epstein was using them.
And with Matt, because I think there are people on the list who you go, well, they were just, I've said this before, that if I had been invited by some rich guy with an island, hey, come over to now knowing what we know, I wouldn't go. But if I didn't know that stuff. So some people on this list maybe were, I don't know, Stephen Hawking or whoever, just let's hang out with this rich guy on an island. And then some people, it looks like, oh, no, you were getting up to no good. So what, Mandelson, where do we stand on that?
Well, we don't know. I mean, we know he had business activities with him. We don't know anything else, but something may emerge. He's been forced to resign twice before. This is the third time he's had to resign because of kind of dodgy dealings, and it's always been financial. So I think that's probably the likely thing. There are certain people, a man called Tom Pritzker, who was the head of Hyatt Hotels, Virginia Giuffre said that she'd been trafficked to him. He denies that. But he was, for example, the pictures just come out of him at one of these shooting weekends at Sandringham with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and Andrew. So he's clearly quite involved. But you're absolutely right. People went on these flights often because of support for their foundations, like Clinton, because Epstein was supporting scientific research. So people like Stephen Hawking went there. He was very good at bringing people together. And where things crossed over between the philanthropy and the business and the sex is very difficult to establish, and may become clearer now that more files may come out.
Bloody hell. So it's probably maybe fair to say Andrew was attracted to obviously there's that life with the young girls, and Fergie, it's the money that Epstein was bringing to them.
Yes. I mean, Andrew, I think there were three things. It was the contacts, which is what he talks about at Newsnight. It was the ready supply of young women. And it was the fact that Epstein was paying Fergie's debts. Fergie actually had more numbers in the Little Black Book than Andrew, 18 to 16.
Numbers for Epstein was?
Yes. No, Epstein had for her.
Oh, right.
So he was clearly in contact with her a lot. Now, that doesn't mean that, she was doing anything illegal. But I think it does suggest that the relationship was pretty close. We know that she stayed at several of his properties, and it would be very difficult to go to those properties and not realize, that something odd was going on. There were naked young teenagers swimming in the pool. There were naked pictures of girls all over the walls. There were phallic soaps in the bathrooms. So she couldn't, and indeed Andrew couldn't have gone to these places without realizing that there was something underhand going on. And both of them were patrons of charities dealing with trafficked women. So there's a real hypocrisy here. They're trying to launder their reputations by this charity work, and yet the reality is that they're very happy to consort with a paedophile.
And particularly the words, "we will play soon," that was Andrew who wrote that, right?
Yep.
And "we are in this together," that suggests now we've done illicit activity. Does it? That's what that suggests?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Andrew was very keen to distance himself from Epstein in that Newsnight interview, said he only saw him a few times and etc. But it's very clear that they were very close and they were deeply involved with each other. And we have a lot of testimony from people who've seen Andrew with young girls on the island, in the Palm Beach house, and in Manhattan. So I think it's it was always a bit difficult for him to claim that, but now we have more and more testimony coming out, written testimony. A lot of this relied on interviews with people. People were trying to discredit Virginia Giuffre as not being a credible witness. A whole campaign by the Maxwell family, Victoria Harvey and others, has now been shown to be complete rubbish. Certainly I quote in my book entitled, Correspondence between Ghislaine and Andrew and Epstein about how they deal with Virginia Giuffre, and they're bringing in PR firms to try and undermine her. So, she was a great sort of heroine, really. She stood up and in some ways was driven to suicide by this whole experience. And, I'm afraid Andrew and Fergie have blood on their hands.
Can I ask you a favor? Please subscribe. 90% of you are not subscribed, so if you sub, it will help the channel and I'll keep making these clips.